while we're on the subject of actresses and awards and hacks, do we have a moment for Rachel Zegler and Snow White? Because there is an update.
There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic.
For years, Disney's live-action remakes were the studio's golden ticket, a way to fuse the beloved nostalgia of classic animated films with the buzz of modern filmmaking. It wasn't uncommon to see audiences flock to theaters, excited to relive old stories with fresh visuals and hear reimagined soundtracks that made familiar tunes feel brand new. Even when critics complained that certain remakes added little besides special effects, the box office numbers rolled in. Fans could never quite resist the appeal of seeing their favorite childhood characters leaping off the screen in a more realistic form. But that sparkling image has cracked in a way few could have predicted. In the wake of a tumultuous production cycle for Snow White, one of Disney's most legendary fairy tales, executives have shocked everyone by announcing they're canceling all future live-action reboots of their cherished classics. This isn't just a delayed release or a quiet shift in marketing strategy. It's a profound pivot from a formula that once seemed immune to failure. And while the studio has weathered its share of controversies over the decades, nothing quite compares to the blowback unleashed by this particular project.
Jonah Platt, whose father helped produce the latest Snow White film, had some very harsh words for star Rachel Zegler.
For context, Variety wrote a report recently titled "Inside Disney's Snow White Fiasco: Death Threats, Beefed Up Security, and a Social Media Guru for Rachel Zegler."
So even though woke in some sense feels like it's dead, it still has to run its course through the system. The ghosts have to get out of the machine in it.
How did a single title cause one of the world's most powerful media companies to pull the plug on an entire category of films? The unraveling of Snow White revealed a deep disconnect between Disney's creative ambitions and fan expectations. What started off as an exciting update to a timeless story morphed into a swirling storm of rumors, social media outrage, and a mounting sense that the studio had lost sight of what made the original so magical in the first place. In the span of just a few months, Snow White went from being a marquee release to the cautionary tale that forced Disney to rethink its entire approach. This meltdown extends beyond the usual gripes about a reboot lacking originality. Instead, it points to a larger shift in audience power. Modern fans don't just consume content. They analyze, debate, and rally around their opinions online with lightning speed. If something feels off, whether it's an overemphasis on updated messaging or changes that uproot a classic's core charm, the backlash can explode in days, if not hours. And once that negative momentum picks up, even a media juggernaut like Disney can find itself struggling to contain the fallout. At the center of it all is an unsettling realization: nostalgia alone isn't enough to guarantee success anymore. Younger generations demand stories that respect the spirit of the original, but still feel relevant to today's world. Older fans want the classics preserved, not hollowed out or used as vehicles for corporate pandering. Snow White tried to walk that tightrope and slipped almost immediately. In the wake of the damage, Disney has responded in the most dramatic way possible by canceling every live-action remake, at least for now. Yet the ramifications of that decision stretch far beyond one troubled production. This may be the beginning of a deeper cultural shift at Disney, forcing it to return to the drawing board for fresh, original ideas, rather than relying on reanimated versions of its greatest hits. It also sends a loud message to other studios. Modern audiences have lines they won't let you cross, even for a brand as revered as Disney. If you tamper too aggressively with beloved classics, be prepared for fans to revolt. So, how did it get to this point? Why are longtime Disney supporters more upset than ever before? And what role did rumors of a star's explosive behavior play in amplifying the uproar? Over the next few sections, we'll dive into the complex story behind Snow White's spectacular fall from grace and examine why it signaled such a drastic pivot for Disney. By the end, you'll see how a single production misstep evolved into a cultural moment, one powerful enough to derail an entire genre of films that once seemed unstoppable. The heart of this fiasco began with whispers that the new Snow White remake was straying too far from its source. Fans who grew up loving the 1937 animated classic felt uneasy about the direction it was taking. Instead of a traditional fairy tale vibe, the remake seemed bent on flipping the story into a modern statement piece. Early leaks suggested the film would expand Snow White's role, downplay the prince, and insert new themes. On paper, that might sound like a decent attempt to update a tale nearly a century old. But in execution, according to test audiences, it lacked the Disney charm that made the original a timeless favorite.
I don't really care about that. What I care about is how she hated the story because it needed to be wokeified, and she hated the fact that there was going to be a Prince Charming of some sort, and they needed to update it. And then what do you know? They try all this updating. They get this lousy screenwriter, in my estimation, because I saw this thing and it was awful, like really, really, really bad.
What poured gasoline on the fire was the notion that Snow White had become a mouthpiece for heavy-handed messaging, overshadowing the magic that should be at the film's core. People reported that entire scenes felt more like lectures than storytelling. Fans who only wanted a whimsical escape were met with a jarring shift in tone. Then, just as the tension was building, a rumor exploded online. The lead actress, Rachel Zegler, had a heated confrontation with film critics and was briefly detained for her outburst. Nobody could confirm if it was true, but it dominated the conversation anyway. Suddenly, the film wasn't just a risky adaptation. It was shaping up to be an outright disaster. Disney tried to calm things by asking audiences to keep an open mind, but the damage was already piling up. Longtime supporters who had defended previous remakes like The Little Mermaid or Cinderella began voicing serious doubts. The narrative forming in fan communities was that Disney had lost its touch. People felt alienated by a project that seemed to bulldoze the legacy of the original Snow White in favor of modern checkboxes. Social media doesn't wait. Once word spread that test screenings were receiving poor feedback, comments about clunky pacing, strange editing, and forced themes, a wave of negativity swelled across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Influential creators uploaded detailed breakdowns criticizing every part of the production. Die-hard Disney enthusiasts, who usually brushed off criticisms as hater talk, started echoing the same concerns. It became clear that Snow White had crossed a line, or at least that's how fans saw it. They were tired of feeling like the original, beloved storyline was being tossed aside. Instead of gentle updates that might enhance a classic for a new generation, viewers felt assaulted by a project that misunderstood what made Snow White enchanting in the first place. Memes, rants, and parodies blew up. When the rumor about Rachel's meltdown circulated, it accelerated the negativity. Speculation about behind-the-scenes chaos overshadowed any official statement from Disney. Audiences also pointed out that these controversies often get dismissed by studios as the ravings of a few trolls. This time, however, it wasn't just a small fraction of angry voices. It was a broad coalition of Disney aficionados and casual moviegoers who all echoed the same sentiment. The movie felt off. The meltdown overshadowed everything else, turning a fairy tale revival into a glaring example of what happens when studios misjudge their audience. Disney is known for its meticulous brand management. Every major move gets vetted through layers of executive meetings and creative oversight. But once test screening feedback leaked, the sense of alarm behind closed doors became impossible to hide. Insiders described hurried discussions about potential reshoots and script alterations. The question was whether they could patch things up before opening night. Executives also worried about the broader implications. Snow White wasn't just a film. It was supposed to be another profitable piece of Disney's live-action lineup, a lineup that had, until now, delivered major box office wins. When the meltdown started dominating online chatter, the biggest fear became that a high-profile flop could damage Disney's overall reputation. Some claimed that big names in the boardroom tried to salvage the project by demanding urgent changes. But the more they tinkered, the more disjointed the film allegedly became. Scenes that had tested well were rearranged or cut entirely in an attempt to soften the controversy, leaving the final product even more muddled. Internally, it felt like the clock was ticking. Disney faced losing not just money, but the trust of an audience that had followed the brand through decades of evolving entertainment. The meltdown itself went beyond standard behind-the-scenes drama. Creative leads reportedly clashed over the direction of the storyline, while marketing teams scrambled to figure out how to sell the film in a way that didn't enrage fans any further. Yet every new tweak seemed to feed the flames. By the time bigwigs realized how deep the crisis ran, online communities had already labeled Snow White a lost cause. When a global powerhouse like Disney decides to abruptly cancel a profitable strategy, it's never a simple call. For years, the formula was straightforward. Take an animated classic with built-in nostalgia, add live-action flair, cast popular actors, and release it to an eager fan base. Even if critics weren't entirely sold, these projects made money hand over fist. But Snow White's backlash exposed a new reality. audiences now demand more than a superficial update.
There were reportedly not even going to be dwarfs either. Rainbow people instead. I thought it was a fan protest. And even the word dwarfs isn't mentioned in this remake. The film has people saying, don't mock sleepy as a neurological condition. And dopey isn't really dopey, that'd be rude.
Disney recognized it couldn't keep repeating the same approach. If fans felt a beloved classic was being fixed or twisted to suit modern trends, the blowback could be fierce enough to overshadow box office returns. The meltdown showed that word of mouth could spread in a matter of days, turning a once bulletproof brand into a target for widespread criticism. Moreover, Snow White's rumored production costs were sky high, pushing the stakes even further. If the film underperformed, it wouldn't be a minor misstep. It would be a colossal financial hit. Plus, the negative PR threatened the entire slate of upcoming live-action remakes. Instead of quietly shelving Snow White and hoping for a better outcome next time, executives recognized a pattern. Each new remake risked igniting a similar controversy. Add to that the social media factor. In the past, studios could rely on polished marketing campaigns to control the narrative. Today, all it takes is a spark to trigger an online inferno that can't be contained, especially when longtime fans feel personally betrayed by changes to the stories they grew up with. Snow White turned into the cautionary tale that Disney apparently decided was too risky to repeat. Few industry watchers predicted Disney would confirm, in almost unequivocal terms, that it was halting all future live-action reinterpretations of its classic hits. Yet that's precisely what happened. Insiders leaked that top-level executives had issued a new policy, set aside any in-progress or planned live-action reboots, at least for the foreseeable future. This announcement sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Entire production teams who'd been quietly developing projects, from Hercules to Bambi, were left uncertain about the future of their work. Some insiders had believed that even if Snow White struggled, Disney would simply adjust its marketing approach and forge ahead with the next potential moneymaker. Instead, the studio's pivot was immediate and dramatic, signaling a deep loss of faith in the entire remake concept. Media analysts immediately started dissecting the decision. Some saw it as a knee-jerk overreaction, arguing that the live-action formula still had financial legs if executed correctly. Others applauded Disney for taking accountability, suggesting the studio was finally acknowledging that constant reboots might be diluting its legacy. One thing was certain: the meltdown around Snow White made Disney realize it couldn't just coast on nostalgia anymore. People also asked a critical question: was this the end of live-action Disney remakes forever, or merely a pause until the dust settled? After all, nothing remains permanent in the film industry. A new CEO or a new wave of public sentiment could spark a revival of the idea. But right now, with the uproar still swirling, the company seems adamant about stepping away before more damage gets done. In every big controversy, there's a public face. For this fiasco, it became Rachel Zegler, an actress thrust into the spotlight by earlier successes, but now entangled in a massive studio meltdown. Supporters defended her statements about wanting to see a more empowered Snow White for modern audiences, arguing that the original film's perspective felt outdated. Critics, however, claimed she was dismissive of legitimate fan concerns. Then came the rumor that she'd had a heated showdown with film critics, supposedly leading to a brief detention. Whether that incident happened or not, it dominated headlines and social feeds. For many fans already on the fence, that rumor confirmed their fears that something chaotic was going on behind the scenes. Rachel's subsequent interviews, meant to calm the waters, often had the opposite effect. Audiences felt she was digging in her heels and doubling down on a version of Snow White they neither recognized nor wanted. Disney tried to shield her, insisting that the drama was overblown and that the film deserved a fair shot. But in the court of public opinion, the meltdown was unstoppable. Critics cited the fiasco as yet another example of a studio ignoring test audiences while insisting it knew best. Fans argued they weren't being heard, fueling the notion that Disney cared more about messaging than delivering a heartfelt fairy tale. In the broader scope, Rachel's involvement became a cautionary tale for up-and-coming actors. If your film triggers a large-scale fan revolt, you risk permanent association with that failure, fair or not. Snow White was supposed to elevate her star power further, but instead, it became a lightning rod for every grievance critics and fans had about Disney's modern reboots. In the wake of the meltdown, speculation runs rampant about Disney's future. Some industry insiders think the studio might shift resources toward brand new stories or expansions of existing franchises that aren't direct remakes of older animated films. The argument is that without the weight of nostalgic expectations, creative teams can craft something original and appealing without the baggage that comes from altering a beloved classic. Others predict Disney might cool things off for a few years, then quietly test the waters again with a safe property. Maybe the studio will choose a story with less cultural significance or an original tale that doesn't risk messing with cherished icons. Another possibility is doubling down on streaming projects, where the stakes are slightly lower and audience reception can be measured more directly. For fans, the biggest question is whether they've lost out on potential remakes that, done correctly, could have been extraordinary. Even though many people are relieved Disney is pulling back, believing the classics should remain untouched, others lament what might have been if the studio had found a better creative balance. That sense of missed opportunity lingers, especially among those who had hoped to see updated visuals and deeper character arcs without sacrificing the fairy tale essence. One lesson seems clear: audiences expect authenticity. If Disney wants to modernize a story, it needs to do so with sensitivity to the original's core appeal. Otherwise, the blowback can overshadow every other aspect of the production. With Snow White, that blowback snowballed so quickly that no amount of reshoots or social media damage control could slow it. Snow White was meant to be another jewel in Disney's crown of live-action reboots, a formula that once seemed bulletproof. Instead, it triggered one of the most dramatic course corrections in the company's history. The meltdown showcased how swiftly public opinion can shift and how even the most loyal fans can turn if they feel a beloved story is being mishandled.
A series of controversies is threatening to derail the opening of Disney's latest big-budget blockbuster. I'm talking about the live-action remake of Snow White, which will be out next week.
Disney has officially canceled all live-action remakes for the time being, sending a clear message that financial gain isn't worth risking the very legacy that has made the studio a global powerhouse for nearly a century. What started as a well-intentioned attempt to bring Snow White into a modern era became the ultimate cautionary tale, highlighting every pitfall of forced messaging, rushed production fixes, and dismissive attitudes toward fan feedback. In an age where social media allows communities to amplify their displeasure in real time, no amount of branding or PR wizardry can outrun a tidal wave of criticism. The fiasco surrounding Rachel Zegler's rumored meltdown only added more fuel to the fire, illustrating how quickly rumors become accepted truth in the public sphere. Now, the entertainment world is left to ponder the deeper implications of Disney's abrupt decision. Is this a momentary retreat or a permanent shift away from reimagining classics? Will future executives see the potential for reviving the strategy with more careful planning? Or is this the end of Disney's live-action era as we know it, replaced by brand new tales unburdened by preconceived notions and fan nostalgia? One thing is for sure, the Snow White incident has become emblematic of how high the stakes can get. If even Disney, armed with decades of goodwill and a treasure trove of iconic characters, can stumble this hard, it suggests that audiences have more power than ever before. Nostalgia is no longer a guaranteed ticket to success. Today's viewers want thoughtful storytelling that pays homage to original magic without smashing it to pieces. Failing to strike that balance can cost a studio not just a single project, but possibly an entire legacy. Whether you're applauding Disney for owning up to a miscalculation or mourning the loss of potential updates to childhood favorites, the impact of this meltdown will reverberate for years. It stands as a stark reminder that beloved classics carry an emotional weight studios ignore at their own peril. Going forward, every reimagined story, Disney or otherwise, will likely tread more carefully, understanding that fans can and will speak up if they sense their cherished tales are being used as vehicles for mismatched agendas. For now, the chapter on live-action Disney remakes has closed, leaving us all to wonder if it will stay locked forever. If history is any indicator, the studio might one day change direction again. But as long as the memories of Snow White's meltdown linger, Disney will proceed with far more caution. After all, the trust and loyalty of generations of fans aren't something even the biggest entertainment empire can afford to gamble away.